What if I told you that during Johnny Depp's most chaotic years in Hollywood, the years filled with paparazzi chases, wild parties, and tabloid headlines, the one person who saved him wasn't a Hollywood director or a glamorous co-star or even a fleeting tabloid romance? What if I told you that the woman who gave him peace, stability, and a love that lasted over a decade came from far away from Hollywood spotlight? This wasn't the Johnny Depp you think you know. Not Captain Jack Sparrow stumbling around with drunken charm. Not Edward Scissorhands, gazing at the world through sad, lonely eyes. Not the Mad Hatter delivering strange lines in voices nobody could predict. This was a Johnny Depp who longed for something quieter, something real. Behind the sunglasses, the rings, the scars, and the mystery, there was a man desperate for stability, searching for love that wasn't measured in red carpets or gossip headlines. And in 1998, in the heart of Paris, he found it. Her name was Vanessa Paradis, a French singer, an actress, a model. But to Johnny, she became so much more. His muse, his anchor, the mother of his children, and the reason he managed to hold on when the world around him spun out of control. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the love story that many people think they know, but few truly understand. We'll explore how Johnny Depp's chance encounter with Vanessa changed the course of his life, how she gave him peace when fame threatened to consume him, and how even after their relationship ended, her influence remained impossible to erase. You'll discover the hidden details about their private life in France, away from flashing cameras, where Johnny wasn't a superstar, but just a father, a partner, and a man in love. We'll talk about the children who became his greatest joy, the quiet stability Vanessa brought into his restless world, and the reason Johnny always described their bond as something deeper than marriage itself. But that's not all, because this story isn't just about romance. It's about loyalty. Even after they separated, when Johnny faced some of the darkest chapters of his career, Vanessa didn't walk away. She stepped forward, defending him, standing by his side when the world turned its back. That kind of devotion is rare. That kind of love leaves a permanent mark. So, was Vanessa Paradis the true love of Johnny Depp's life? Was she his muse, the woman who defined his best years, and the one whose influence still lingers in his style, his spirit, and even his art? Or is Johnny's greatest love story still waiting to be written? Stay with us until the very end of this video, because what you'll hear will not only change the way you see Johnny Depp, it will also make you question what it really means to find love in a world built on fame and chaos. Welcome to Story Spot, where we bring you the untold stories behind the headlines. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us as we uncover the love story that still inspires to this day. Before we dive into Johnny Depp's love story with Vanessa Paradis, we have to pause and look at the man he was before she walked into his life. Because to understand why she mattered so much, you need to understand the world he was living in and the chaos that surrounded him. When most people think of Johnny Depp, the images that flash across their minds are unforgettable. Captain Jack Sparrow, stumbling across the deck of his ship with slurred speech and a mischievous grin. Edward Scissorhands, silent, pale, and tragic, trying to hold the world gently with hands made of blades. Or the Mad Hatter, with his wild eyes, colorful hats, and a voice no one could ever predict. These characters weren't just roles. They became cultural icons. They turned Johnny into one of the most celebrated and mysterious actors of his generation. Hollywood saw him as the ultimate outsider, the man who refused to play by the rules, who never wanted to be the typical romantic leading man, and who always chose the strange over the safe. Directors like Tim Burton adored him for it. Audiences worshipped him for it. But here's the thing. Off-screen, the reality was far less glamorous. Behind the quirky characters and the carefully crafted bohemian style, the scarves, the layered jewelry, the messy hair, the sunglasses at night, was a man who was restless, unpredictable, and often lost in the whirlwind of fame. In the 1990s, Depp was at the height of his stardom, but he was also trapped in a cycle of headlines that rarely painted him as the calm, grounded man he longed to be. There were stories of bar fights, hotel room wreckages, and wild nights with friends like Hunter S. Thompson. His personal life became a favorite subject for tabloids, especially his fiery, stormy relationship with supermodel Kate Moss. The paparazzi loved them. Johnny and Kate were Hollywood's dangerous golden couple, beautiful, rebellious, passionate, and explosive. But behind the flashes of cameras and glamorous photo shoots, the reality was much harder. Their love was intense, but it was also unstable. When it ended, Johnny himself admitted that he had let her down, that he hadn't been the partner she needed him to be. The breakup left him drained, guilty, and restless. And that's the Johnny Depp who entered 1998, a man adored by millions on screen, but also a man haunted by turbulence off it. Think about it for a moment. Fame had given him everything an outsider kid from Kentucky could ever dream of: fortune, power, global recognition. But it hadn't given him peace. It hadn't given him the stability he quietly longed for. The Hollywood machine kept turning, demanding more roles, more press, more headlines. And Johnny, though brilliant at slipping into eccentric characters, struggled when it came to finding balance in his own life. Behind closed doors, those who knew him best often saw a different man. A man who wasn't always Captain Jack, or Edward Scissorhands, or the Mad Hatter. They saw someone quieter, more thoughtful, and often vulnerable. He wasn't just chasing eccentricity for the sake of rebellion. He was searching for meaning, for something real, for a kind of love that could anchor him. Hollywood, however, isn't built for stability. It thrives on chaos. Relationships come and go. Stars burn bright and fade just as quickly. And Johnny Depp, with his mysterious aura and restless spirit, was right in the middle of it all. He could disappear into a role with perfection, but when the camera stopped rolling, he often found himself adrift. And that's why the next part of the story matters so much. Because when Vanessa Paradis walked into his life, she didn't just become another headline or another romance. She became the calm in the storm. But before we get to that moment, the night in Paris when Johnny first laid eyes on her, you need to see just how much he needed her. Johnny wasn't searching for more fame, more spotlight, or more chaos. He had enough of that. What he needed was peace. What he needed was someone who could look past the characters, past the fame, past the myth of Johnny Depp, and see the man underneath. And that's exactly what Vanessa would do. By 1998, Johnny Depp had the world at his feet, but his personal life was in pieces. He was tired, restless, carrying the weight of failed relationships, and still running from the chaos that Hollywood never let him escape. He was adored on screen, but off screen he was adrift. And then, in one single moment, everything changed. It happened in Paris. At the Hotel Casse, a place known for its quiet elegance, its candlelit atmosphere, and the kind of refined luxury that felt a world away from Los Angeles. Johnny was there, wandering through the lobby, still carrying fatigue of fame on his shoulders. And then, across the room, he saw her, Vanessa Paradis. She wasn't just another beautiful face. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She wasn't wrapped in the usual Hollywood glitter. She had something else. An energy, a quiet confidence, a kind of magnetic presence that made the noise of the world fade away. Johnny later admitted that in that moment, his world stopped. Imagine that. A man who had spent decades surrounded by fame, beauty, flashing cameras, and endless distractions, suddenly struck still by one look. He said it was as if everything around him blurred and disappeared, and all he could see was her. And here's what made that moment even more powerful. Vanessa was not impressed by him. She didn't see Johnny Depp, global superstar. She saw Johnny, the man, and that was exactly what he needed. At the time, Vanessa was already a star in France. In fact, she had been famous for most of her life. At just 14 years old, her song Joe Le Taxi had turned her into a household name across Europe. From there, she built a career as a singer, an actress, and a model. She had walked the world's most glamorous runways, starred in films, and recorded music that showcased her haunting, unforgettable voice. But unlike so many who orbit Hollywood stars, Vanessa wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't trying to latch onto Johnny's spotlight. She was already accomplished. She was already respected. She was her own person. And that independence, that strength was magnetic. To Johnny, who was surrounded by people who often wanted something from him, Vanessa represented the exact opposite. She didn't need him to complete her. She didn't want him for his fame. She simply saw him, and he, in return, saw her. It didn't take long for the two of them to become inseparable. But their love story wasn't loud. It wasn't built on red carpets or screaming headlines. Instead, it was private, quiet, almost defiant in the face of Hollywood's obsession with spectacle. Think about that choice for a moment. Johnny Depp, one of the biggest stars in the world, and Vanessa Paradis, a French icon in her own right, could have been everywhere. They could have been a couple of every award show, every magazine cover, every tabloid headline. But instead, they chose something different. They chose each other. Vanessa grounded Johnny. She gave him something he had never really had before, stability. With her, he didn't have to be Johnny Depp movie star. He could just be Johnny, the man. And for someone who had spent years running from chaos, that was life-changing. Their romance blossomed quickly, and yet it wasn't reckless. There was a maturity to it, a calmness. Vanessa understood what it meant to be an artist. She had lived that life herself. She understood the pressures of fame, the cost of constant attention, and the importance of creating a space away from all. That's why, instead of staying in Los Angeles, they built much of their life in France. There, they could escape the paparazzi, the gossip, and the relentless noise of Hollywood. There, Johnny found something he'd been searching for all along: peace. In Paris, he wasn't just a superstar. He was a man walking through cobbled streets with the woman he loved. He was a partner, and soon he would become a father. But even before children entered the picture, Vanessa's influence was already clear. Johnny seemed calmer, more centered, more himself. Interviews from that period show a softer side of him, less guarded, less restless. The world saw Johnny Depp, the eccentric star. Vanessa saw Johnny, the man who could finally breathe, and maybe that's what made their meeting so powerful. Because it wasn't just love at first sight. It was salvation at first sight. Johnny wasn't just falling for a woman. He was finding the life he had always wanted but never thought he could have. Of course, the tabloids eventually caught on. They photographed the couple walking hand in hand, Vanessa's effortless French style blending perfectly with Johnny's bohemian edge. They became a fascination, but unlike his past romances, this one didn't collapse under the weight of fame. It grew stronger. Johnny once described seeing Vanessa as a moment that changed everything. And when you look at the years that followed, it's hard to argue with him, because this wasn't just another romance. This was the beginning of a love story that would define over a decade of his life. A story that would give him children, a home, and a kind of peace he had never known. And it all started in a Paris hotel lobby, with a single glance across the room. After that fateful meeting in Paris, Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis didn't waste time with the usual Hollywood games. There were no staged appearances to grab headlines, no carefully orchestrated photo ops. Instead, they quietly began building a life together, one that would become the most grounded chapter of Johnny's famously turbulent story. And here's what set it apart. They didn't build this life in Los Angeles. They chose France. For Johnny, who had spent years hounded by paparazzi, splashed across tabloids, and chased down hotel corridors, France was freedom. In the quiet towns outside Paris, there were no swarms of photographers waiting on every corner, no constant spotlight burning holes into his private life. Instead, there were cobblestone streets, hidden cafes, markets filled with fresh produce, and the kind of anonymity he had long craved. Vanessa already belonged to that world. She was effortlessly French, stylish without trying, cool without demanding attention, grounded in a way that contrasted completely with the chaos Johnny was running from. And together, they found something rare, a space where they could simply live. In 1999, just a year after they met, Vanessa gave birth to their first child, Lily Rose. For Johnny, it was nothing short of life-changing. He would later say that becoming a father saved him. Think about that for a second. A man who had built a reputation for living on the edge, bar fights, broken hotel rooms, late nights with Hunter S. Thompson, suddenly found himself holding a tiny baby girl in his arms. In interviews, Johnny described a moment with honesty that shocked fans. He admitted that before Lily Rose, his life had no real anchor. But the instant he looked into her eyes, he felt something shift. Suddenly, it wasn't about fame, money, or roles anymore. It was about being a father, about being present, about protecting this fragile little life he had helped bring into the world. 2 years later, in 2002, their son Jack was born. With 2 children, Johnny and Vanessa's family felt complete. And unlike so many Hollywood couples who turned parenthood into a media circus, Johnny and Vanessa did the opposite. They kept their children away from the spotlight, choosing privacy over publicity, family dinners over red carpets. This was not the Hollywood formula. This was something else entirely. When asked why he and Vanessa never married, Johnny gave an answer that revealed just how deeply he saw their bond. He said, "Marriage is really from soul to soul, heart to heart. You don't need somebody to say, 'Okay, you're married.'" To him, the love he shared with Vanessa was already deeper than a piece of paper. Their children were living proof of that bond. Their life together was the real commitment. And here's where Vanessa's influence shines the brightest. She didn't try to mold Johnny into someone else. She didn't demand that he give up his quirks, his music, his restless creativity. Instead, she gave him balance. With her, he could be both, Johnny Depp the artist, and Johnny the father, the partner, the man who cooked dinner at home. Their life in France was a stark contrast to the chaos of Los Angeles. Imagine it. Johnny Depp, one of the world's most recognizable stars, walking through a local market with Vanessa, picking out vegetables, blending into crowd like any other man. For him, those moments were priceless. They allowed him to live the one thing fame had always stolen from him, normality. And yet, their life wasn't boring. It wasn't ordinary. It was rich with creativity. Both Johnny and Vanessa were artists at their core, he in film, music, and painting. She in music, acting, and fashion. Their home life often echoed with music, with their children growing up in an environment where creativity wasn't something to be performed for cameras, but something to be lived every day. For Johnny, those years were some of the happiest of his life. He often spoke about how, after years of searching, he had finally found peace. With Vanessa by his side and their children in his arms, the restlessness seemed to fade. In interviews, his eyes softened when he spoke about family. Gone was the unpredictable wild man the tabloids loved to write about. In his place was a man who cherished bedtime stories, quiet evenings, and the laughter of his kids echoing through the house. But it wasn't just Johnny who changed. Together, they created a rhythm that suited them both. They didn't flaunt their love. They lived it. They didn't use their relationship for attention. They protected it. In a world where Hollywood relationships often crumbled under the weight of fame, Johnny and Vanessa built something that felt timeless. And that's what made them so fascinating. They weren't trying to be a power couple. They weren't trying to dominate headlines. They were just 2 artists who found each other across a Paris lobby and decided to create a family, a life, and a love that made sense in a world that often didn't. For more than a decade, they lived that way, together, raising their children, choosing the quiet of France over the chaos of Los Angeles, embracing simplicity over spectacle. It was in many ways the closest thing Johnny ever had to a fairy tale chapter. But as every story teaches us, even the most beautiful fairy tales face challenges. And by 2012, after 14 years together, the cracks in their relationship could no longer be hidden. Still, the way Johnny and Vanessa handled their separation would prove, once again, that their love was different. For more than a decade, Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis built what looked, from the outside, like a rare kind of Hollywood love story. 14 years together, 2 children, and a life deliberately chosen away from the chaos of Los Angeles. They had seemed untouchable. But even the strongest stories can reach their breaking point. By 2012, rumors began to swirl. Whispers in tabloids hinted at distance between the couple. Johnny was filming more often, traveling further, while Vanessa seemed rooted in France, keeping their children grounded. It wasn't a dramatic explosion, not one shocking incident that shattered everything, but rather the quiet erosion of a relationship stretched thin by time, distance, and the relentless pull of 2 demanding careers. When the announcement finally came, fans were stunned. After 14 years together, Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis had separated. In a world where celebrity breakups often turn into ugly public spectacles, lawyers trading barbs, exes attacking each other in interviews, the silence around Johnny and Vanessa's split was almost deafening. There was no screaming match in the press. No ugly headlines quoting betrayals. Instead, what people heard was respect. Johnny spoke publicly about the breakup, but not with bitterness. Instead, he praised Vanessa. He thanked her for the years they had shared, for the 2 beautiful children they raised together, and for the stability she had given him during some of the most important chapters of his life. In interviews, he made it clear she was not someone to be spoken of with anger. She was someone to be honored. For Vanessa, too, there was no tabloid war. She retreated from the noise, choosing to focus on her career, her music, and above all, her children. While speculation swirled around them, was there someone else? Had the distance been too great? Neither Johnny nor Vanessa fueled the fire. They refused to let their love story, even in its ending, be reduced to cheap gossip. And that's what made their separation so different. In Hollywood, endings often erase everything that came before. But for Johnny and Vanessa, the respect remained. It was as if both of them knew that what they had shared, those 14 years, those children, that life together, deserved dignity. But make no mistake, the separation hurt. For Johnny, it marked the end of the most stable chapter of his life. He admitted in later interviews that the split was difficult, that it shook him. And yet, even in his pain, he never spoke a cruel word about her. And here's the remarkable part. Even though their romance ended, the bond between Johnny and Vanessa never fully disappeared. Because love can change shape. It can evolve from passion into friendship, from partnership into respect. And for Johnny and Vanessa, that transformation became clear in the years that followed. Because when Johnny's world grew darker, when scandals and lawsuits and controversies threatened to overwhelm him, Vanessa didn't walk away. She didn't erase him from her story. She stepped forward. She defended him. She reminded the world of the man she had lived with, the father of her children, the person she knew better than the headlines ever could. And that loyalty, coming even after the end of their romance, proved that what they had was real, not perfect, not eternal, in the way fairy tales promise, but real. The end of their relationship didn't erase the years they had built together. It didn't erase the laughter of their children, the quiet dinners in France, the music, the art, the nights when Johnny found peace for the first time in his life. Instead, it showed something rare, that even when a love story ends, respect can remain. And sometimes, respect is just as powerful as love itself. For fans, the separation of Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis was heartbreaking. But for those who looked closer, it revealed something deeper, that theirs was never a love story written for tabloids. It wasn't built for drama. It was built for something quieter, something that left behind not bitterness, but gratitude. And in that gratitude lies the heart of what made them different. When people talk about muses, they often think of a fleeting inspiration, a face in a painting, a love song written in someone's honor, a temporary spark that drives an artist for a while. But what Johnny Depp found in Vanessa Paradis was far more profound. She wasn't just a chapter in his life. She became the quiet rhythm that steadied his chaos, the subtle influence that touched everything from the way he dressed to the choices he made in his art. Before Vanessa, Johnny's style had already caught attention. He was the outsider Hollywood, the man with layered scarves, silver rings stacked on every finger, messy hair, and dark sunglasses at night. It was eccentric, bold, and unpredictable, much like his film roles. But when Vanessa entered his life, something shifted. The edge was still there, but it softened. Suddenly, that bohemian rock and roll look carried with it a touch of Parisian elegance, unpolished but effortlessly chic. It wasn't something forced. It wasn't a makeover. It was a natural blending of two lives. When you live with someone, you start absorbing pieces of each other, habits, mannerisms, little sparks of style. And with Vanessa, Johnny's look became a fusion of American rebel and French sophistication. Fans noticed it. The press wrote about it. But to Johnny, it wasn't about fashion. It was about feeling at home with someone who balanced him. And it wasn't just his appearance that changed. It was his energy. In interviews during those years, Johnny often seemed calmer, softer, more reflective. Gone was the unpredictable wild man who stormed through tabloids with broken hotel rooms and midnight escapades. Instead, There was a man who spoke lovingly about his children, who described fatherhood as salvation, who smiled when asked about home life in France. That shift wasn't accidental. It was Vanessa. Their home in France became a refuge for Johnny. Away from paparazzi, away from studio executives, away from the spotlight, he discovered something he had never truly known: normality. Dinners at home, school runs, market strolls, music playing softly in the background while their children laughed in the next room. These weren't small things. For Johnny, they were revolutionary. And Vanessa wasn't just a partner in family life. She was an artist in her own right, a singer with a haunting voice, an actress respected for her quiet strength, a model with timeless appeal. She didn't need Hollywood validation, and that independence made her even more magnetic. Johnny admired her deeply. She wasn't living in his shadow. She was standing beside him, accomplished and respected on her own terms. That artistic connection built a bridge between them. Both understood the sacrifices, the obsessions, the insecurities that come with a life dedicated to creativity. Both knew the difference between commercial success and true artistic expression. And because of that shared understanding, Johnny felt free to take risks. During those years, he threw himself into roles that might have seemed strange to Hollywood insiders but made perfect sense to him. He wasn't chasing blockbuster approval. He was chasing characters that fascinated him. And behind that courage was a quiet reassurance of Vanessa, reminding him that his worth wasn't tied to ticket sales, but to authenticity. It wasn't just in film. Johnny's music and painting also blossomed during that time. With Vanessa by his side, he returned to his first love, music, more often, performing with friends, creating, experimenting. She gave him a space where creativity wasn't judged, only encouraged. That's what muses do. They don't just inspire one piece of art. They inspire a life lived with artistry. And you could see her presence in the way Johnny carried himself. There was balance. A man who could be Captain Jack Sparrow on set, wild, eccentric, larger than life, and then vanish into French countryside, blending into the rhythm of family life, guitar in hand, children on his lap. Even his relationship with fame shifted under Vanessa's influence. Johnny has often admitted he never cared for Hollywood parties, red carpets, or award shows. But with Vanessa, he didn't even pretend to. Together, they actively chose a quieter existence. They turned down the circus and embraced simplicity. Think about how rare that is. Most couples in Hollywood are defined by visibility, appearing together at premieres, feeding the public's appetite for glamour. Johnny and Vanessa, instead, chose invisibility. They gave the public as little as possible, holding tight to the sacred privacy of their family. And in that choice, Johnny found relief. Vanessa reminded him that it was okay to live beyond the cameras, to measure life not in applause, but in laughter at the dinner table. And yet, even as they avoided the spotlight, the influence was undeniable. Fans saw it. The industry noticed it. During his years with Vanessa, Johnny's work carried a balance, a steadiness, that mirrored the stability of his private life. He was still eccentric, still adventurous, but grounded in a way he had never been before. For over a decade, Vanessa was his muse. Not because she posed for his paintings or appeared in his films, but because she inspired him to live differently, to live more fully, to live as more than a superstar. She inspired the man beneath the myth. And that's what made her role in his life so unforgettable. She didn't just influence his art. She influenced his soul. If there's one lasting testament to the love Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis shared, it isn't found in red carpet photos or old interviews. It's found in their children. Lily Rose and Jack Depp became the living proof of a bond that, even after separation, remained strong and undeniable. From the very beginning, Johnny made it clear that fatherhood changed everything for him. When Lily Rose was born in 1999, he described the moment as transformative, like finding the missing piece of himself he never knew he was searching for. Before her, his life was chaotic, restless, consumed by roles, headlines, and the constant noise of fame. But holding her in his arms gave him a new purpose. He often said she saved him. And when Jack arrived in 2002, Johnny and Vanessa's family fell whole. Their children became the anchor that steadied them both. In a world where celebrity kids often grow up in the glare of flashing cameras, Johnny and Vanessa made a different choice. They protected their children fiercely, raising them largely in France, away from the paparazzi storms of Los Angeles. That choice shaped who Lily Rose and Jack became. While Lily Rose eventually stepped into the spotlight with her own career as an actress and model, she carried with her a sense of balance that reflected her parents' influence. She had Johnny's artistic spirit, his willingness to take risks, and Vanessa's elegance, the quiet strength and grounded grace that defined her mother. Jack, on the other hand, grew up even more private. He avoided the spotlight almost entirely, rarely appearing in interviews or tabloids. For him, life was about being himself, not being Johnny Depp's son. And that decision spoke volumes about the way he was raised, with the freedom to choose his own path, unshaped by Hollywood expectations. Johnny often spoke of his children with deep pride and gratitude. In interviews, his voice softened when he mentioned them. He described fatherhood not as an obligation, but as the greatest joy of his life. For a man once known for unpredictable wildness, his children grounded him in a way nothing else ever could. And Vanessa? She was a steady presence who made that family life possible. She created a home where creativity and normality lived side by side, where their children could grow up surrounded by love rather than chaos. Even after the breakup, she and Johnny continued to co-parent with respect and unity. There were no public custody battles, no toxic feuds. Just two parents putting their children first. Lily Rose has often spoken about the influence of her parents, describing how they taught her to value privacy, authenticity, and art. She once said that while she grew up in a famous family, she never felt like fame defined her childhood. That was no accident. It was a result of the choices Johnny and Vanessa made together. And isn't that the true legacy of their love? Not just the memories of their years together, but the values they passed on. Lily Rose and Jack carry forward the balance their parents created. The mix of Hollywood artistry and Parisian normalcy, the fusion of eccentric creativity and grounded elegance. In them, the story of Johnny and Vanessa lives on. Because children aren't just reflections of their parents' love. They are living legacies, proof that even when a romance ends, its impact continues, shaping the next generation. For Johnny, being a father became the role he cherished most. More than Captain Jack Sparrow, more than Edward Scissorhands, more than any character he ever played, fatherhood defined him, and Vanessa Paradis gave him that gift. When you trace the story of Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis, it feels less like a Hollywood romance and more like a chapter pulled from a novel. It had all the elements: fate, passion, family, heartbreak, and above all, respect. But unlike so many Hollywood tales, theirs wasn't built on scandal or spectacle. It was built on something deeper, something quieter, something that still lingers long after their separation. For Johnny, Vanessa was never just a partner. She was his muse. She was a calm in the storm, the one who gave him a sense of normality when fame threatened to consume him. She shaped his energy, softened his chaos, and reminded him that there was more to life than flashing lights and box office numbers. With her, he was not Johnny Depp, the superstar. He was Johnny, the man, the father, the partner who found peace in the simple joys of life. Even after their love story ended, Vanessa's presence never truly left. She defended him when the world turned on him. She honored the years they had built together. And through their children, Lily Rose and Jack, her influence on Johnny's life continues to this day. Think about what that means. In a city where relationships often collapse under the weight of ego and fame, Johnny and Vanessa managed to write a story that lasted beyond the romance itself. 14 years together, 2 children, and even in separation, loyalty. That kind of legacy is rare, but it leaves us with a question. Was Vanessa Paradis the love of Johnny Depp's life? The one who defined him, inspired him, and gave him the stability he had always longed for? Was she the true muse who helped him through his most chaotic years, leaving a mark that no one else could? Or is Johnny's greatest love story still ahead of him? Another chapter waiting to be written. Another muse yet to arrive. Another unexpected turn in a life already filled with dramatic twists? The truth may never be clear. What we do know is that Vanessa's influence can still be seen in Johnny today. in his style, in the way he speaks about family, and in the children who carry their legacy forward. Their story might have ended as a romance, but as a bond, it endures. And maybe that's the true definition of a muse. Not someone who inspires a single painting or a fleeting role or a short-lived passion, but someone who shapes you so deeply that their influence never disappears. Someone who leaves an imprint on your soul that time, distance, or even separation can't erase. That is what Vanessa Paradis was for Johnny Depp, and that is why, even now, their love story still inspires. So, what do you think? Was Vanessa the one love that truly defined Johnny Depp's life? Or do you believe the greatest chapter of his story is still yet to come? Stay with us here on Story Spot as we continue uncovering the untold stories behind the headlines. And if you enjoyed this journey into Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis' unforgettable love story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more. Because sometimes the greatest stories aren't the ones Hollywood tells us. They're the ones that live quietly in the shadows, waiting to be remembered.